led to him being the only president in the history of the world who refused to recognize the independence of his own country.
Yeah.
And hi, sorry. Welcome to the Jib. This bi-weekly podcast is about the many and varied schemes of the many and varied U.S. law enforcement and intelligence agencies, organizations, and committees, and how they are stupid and funny. Join us on our merry journey through space and time. Hi, my name is Barry. You may recognize me as the first guy to be eaten if we ever hit a zombie apocalypse.
So we just don't have to outrun you. Is that what you're saying?
Dude, I don't know, man. I hear a lot of people saying, if I was in a zombie apocalypse, I do this. I'm going to get eaten. Day one, 8 a.m.
Down to Winchester, have a pub, and everything will be okay.
Not even. I'm not going to make it that far. Are you kidding me?
Well, that's what I'll be doing. But she'll be eating and now slow them down.
Fair enough, yeah.
Anyway, hi, everybody. I'm Seamus. You may know me as the guy who says, I love the curds, but fuck the whey.
The way curds and whey in this economy?
Right? Like, who could do that?
Oh, the price of eggs is going up. Curds and whey. Just pick one.
Right? I go with the curds.
You're not a medieval baron.
Yeah. Unlike America, I do not abandon my curds, okay? That's a little dark, I guess, but you know.
Well, it's okay. Don't worry. It's going to get darker before we're finished because we're not here. We're not here to discuss the breakup of Kurdistan after World War I. We're here to discuss Panama, which, given Donald Trump's latest comments, I thought we might get into Panama, which is a country. All right. Now,
I'm going to Van Halen song.
Is it?
You never heard Panama by Van Halen?
That's not the one with the. Oh no, that's Explosion. No, I've never heard Panama. No.
Panama. Never heard that. Wow.
Like, is it good?
Like David Lee Roth. It's, you know.
Well, apart from that, is it good? I mean, I want to hold that against him.
Yeah, I mean, for Van Halen, it's good.
Okay, Eddie Van Halen is great.
I think he's slightly overrated. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, but that's only because everybody loves him so much.
So, yeah. Okay.
Do you really not like Eddie Van Halen? I like him as a guitarist. You don't like him?
I do, but I think he's very, very, very overrated.
No, I agree with that. He's overrated. That's because he's a rock guitarist. He's not jazz. Like,
well, okay. We'll move along.
That is Panama. Now, the first thing you might notice about Panama there is, and this is a surprise if you've never seen it before, is that it's horizontal. Well, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Because if you've never seen Panama before, you might have an idea in your mind, like I did, that North America and South America kind of run into each other in a straight line. But this is right bang in the middle. This is Panama, and it's relatively horizontal. The second thing that you might find surprising is the Panama Canal there is in the middle of it, going through the little dark lake in the middle of Panama. But you might notice it's on a slant, and the Atlantic entrance of the Panama is closer to the Pacific side of the country than the Pacific entrance of the canal, which is closer to the Atlantic side of the country. And that, again, is another surprise. And if I've explained myself correctly, I don't have to. If you can see what I mean there. It looks like it's almost going a bit backwards. That was clearly not clearly, as we will find out, but I guess that's the most efficient way to go through Panama.
Probably also worth noting that Colombia, how close it is to Panama, because I believe
it's on the border of Colombia and Costa Rica. Yeah, right next to Colombia and Costa Rica. Colombia, of course, famous for
cocaine.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
And coffee.
There it is. Looking all wrong. On the right over there, you can see there it is. Yeah, Darien National Park on the very right on the border with Colombia. You see Darien National Park, and the province of Darien right on the Colombian border. The Pan American Highway, which runs for around 30,000 clicks from the very top of North America to the very end of South America, except for a 100 kilometers densely rainforested section in Darien, right in there, called the Darien Gap. Now, apart from the terrible conditions on the ground, there are also concerns about the spread of disease, drug trafficking, and a local indigenous population who seem united in their belief that they would prefer to have a dense rainforest in Darien than, a bypass. Another surprise is that the Atlantic entrance is the Panama Canal, and I've already mentioned this, which means I should not preempt my own script. This means all boats travel in the opposite direction to what you'd expect. Anyway, this canal is going to feature heavily in the next 40 minutes of all of your lives.
Yay.
So you can zoom out again. Yeah, there we are. After the fall of, I'm not going back to 4000 BC, guys, all right? That's all fun and games with Syria and Iran. But with Panama, no, forget it, mate. Ain't going down that way. After the fall of Moorish Spain and Columbus's adventures of 1492, things moved fast. Not as fast as Islam, but pretty fast. That's the Valsimuller map, right? That was created in 1508. Now remember, they only discovered the flipping place in 1492, and this is the map from 1508, which they kind of, if you look at the top bit, they kind of think the entire continent of America is just an island off the coast of India.
Right?
Right?
Yeah.
So That's the map from 1508. In 1510, after the fourth voyage of Columbus explored Panama, this fourth voyage, man, that guy was busy. The Spanish established the first permanent settlement on the mainland on the east coast of Panama, Santa Maria de la Antigua del Darien. Right? In 1513, and this is all moving fast, Vasco Nunez del Balboa was the first European to see the Pacific Ocean. I mean, from that side, obviously. Or maybe not even from that side, because when was Marco Polo? Maybe the first European to see the Pacific Ocean at all, and certainly at least from that angle. By 1522, the Magellan expedition had proved that you could in fact sail all around the world, although he had to go around by Argentina to do it. There's got to be a better way. If only there was some way through this tiny little bit of land here we call Panama. In 1514, Pedrerías de Vila was appointed governor of Castilla del Oro, Panama, which I think means Golden Castle. And immediately, do you speak Spanish?
No.
Well, neither do I. So we have that in context. It's going to be a fun episode with the two of us, right?
Yep.
I think Castilla del Oro, I think, means Golden Castle. Golden anything in that place, right? This place is made of gold. They're just chipping it off the trees. And immediately set about establishing travel routes especially designed to transfer cargo across the country between ports, including the Camino Real, which still exists as a hiking trail. So basically they're a portage trail. They just carry stuff across. So even then, at this stage, they're kind of saying this tiny little bit of land has potential, right? Now, this isn't directly relevant to why I'm talking about this, but it's kind of funny, so I'm going to talk about it. It's called the Darien Scheme. In 1695, in the Kingdom of Scotland, after some years of miserable weather, crop failures, and famine, the government set up the Company of Scotland specifically to embark on colonial adventures. The original idea was to emulate the East India Company and set up operations in India and China, but it morphed into a Panama colony proposal. The idea was to take advantage of the Darien Gap, to tame the rainforests and administer all trans-Panama trade. New Edinburgh was established in New Caledonia in 1698 by 1,200 Scottish explorers and colonials, most of whom had no idea what they were doing. But then you could say that about all the colonials, couldn't you? It took a few generations for them to figure out how to settle in. The natives refused to deal with them, and the Dutch and English colonies refused to help them because they were afraid of the Spanish reprisals. They had, after all, set up bang in the middle of the Spanish Main meaning everything that Spain owned on the Gulf of America coast, or as we call it, the Gulf of the Jib. That's the Steve Martin joke from last Saturday. Sorry. Disease, famine, and rampant alcoholism destroyed the colony to the point where there were 6 people left in July 1699. 6. A month later, there were some people on the ships, but in the actual colony, there's people who stayed on the ships throughout the colony, by the way. But on the actual colony, there was only 6 people left. A month later,
people on the ship were the smart people,
or the people in charge. Yeah. A month later, 2 resupply ships from Scotland found nothing but abandoned huts and hundreds of overgrown graves. They were surprised. These people were surprised because for some reason the colonists kept sending letters back to the kingdom about how great everything was in New Edinburgh. One of the resupply ships caught fire and sank, and the other one became infested with disease and fled. In September, a resupply ship from New York under Scottish Captain Thomas Drummond similarly arrived and found nothing but ruins and the wreck of the first supply ship. Everything took forever back then, so in Scotland they were still assuming, when Thomas Drummond discovered these ruins, everyone in Scotland was still assuming everything was going great in their new colony. They decided to send it a second voyage. And even if they knew about the disaster, it might not have changed the overall strategy, because the Scottish aristocracy already had so much money tied up in this scheme, they might have committed the sunk cost fallacy. Where, like, I'm after spending so much money on this thing, it better fucking deliver, or I'm dead. So I'll just pump a bit more money into it, or It landed in November, the second shipment, and found Thomas Drummond was still there, the new guy from New York. He was still in the bay when these new guys turned up. The morale of the newly arrived men took a beating as they saw the ruined colony that they would have to build from scratch. They thought they would be in a thriving metropolis. Drummond fought with the new colonists because he felt it was more important to build some sort of defences against what he felt was an imminent Spanish attack. And as it turns out, he was right. And after a messy battle where more people died of disease than the fighting, the Spaniards retook Panama, and the Scottish contingent left and would never return. Of the 2,500 total colonists, only a few hundred survived. Drummond sailed on. What?
Wow.
Yeah, wow. It's they pretty much cleaned them out. Yeah, most of it, and pretty much all of it, I think, disease. Right. Well, we saw this in the Haiti episode as well. Like, it was a genuine tactic of war for the Haitian revolutionaries to pull back during the rainy season and just let the mosquitoes fucking destroy the French army. That's in our Haiti episode. If you want to check it out, in the first episode of our Haiti episode, if you if you just really hate yourself. Drummond sailed on company boats to Africa after that with goods to trade for gold, but traded for slaves instead. Yay! Which he sold in Madagascar. On the way home, the ships were stolen by pirates and the Drummonds were never seen again.
Well, that's good.
The broader consequences were the bankruptcy of the entire Kingdom of Scotland, which had sunk up to 40% of their entire wealth into this Darien scheme. A lot of money tied up, right? The urgent cash crisis convinced the Scottish aristocracy, who for this reason were referred to as a parcel of rogues by Robbie Burns for their treason. This Scottish aristocracy basically sold Scotland to England. The 1707 Act of Union created the United Kingdom and forwarded around 400,000 English pounds to be used against Scottish national debt. And that's back when 400,000 was a lot of money.
Yeah, right.
I know I say that a lot, but to give you an idea, the yearly average wage in England was £26. The average yearly wage was £26. They gave the Scottish aristocracy 400,000 English pounds for the country, which, if you know anything about Scottish people and how they feel about independence and so on, it's all informed by stuff that actually happened. You know, they're not being silly about it.
No.
But we're not here to talk about Scotland. We're talking about Panama.
Kind of got me sideways there for a minute.
Oh, that's what she said. Okay, here we go. Panama. We have very different lives, Seamus. Panama remained part of the Spanish Empire until a bloodless revolution in 1821. The perhaps poorly named Independence Act of Panama had as its first two articles, and this is translated literally, the first two articles are: 1. Panama, spontaneously and under the general vote of the people of understanding, is declared free and independent of the Spanish government. 2. The territory of the provinces of the isthmus meaning the tiny stretch of land between continents, isthmus, belongs to the Republic of Gran Colombia, to whose Congress our deputy will promptly go to represent us. So very much like the Texan independence movement, as soon as they were free of one crowd, they signed up immediately to a union with another. And they regarded that as, I don't know, if that's their choice, then I guess let them at it, right? But they signed up to Colombia. So for the next, I guess, maybe 100 years or so, they're basically a part of Colombia. But nevertheless, it's also still Panama. The local elites and bourgeoisie had, at an open meeting, decided to sign up with Colombia more or less immediately because they were afraid of Spanish reprisals, and they were keen to keep goods flowing through uninterrupted trade routes. They didn't want a lengthy, drawn-out thing to be fucking up supply routes, right? Because the whole thing about Panama was it was making all their money from trade.
Right.
In 1843, a good year, the British explored running a canal through Nicaragua, but it came to nothing. The Americans similarly tried to build a canal through Nicaragua. We have a map of Nicaragua there, don't we?
I do.
Or as I call it, Nicaragua. There it is. Now you can see that lake in the middle is quite tempting, right? Mm-hmm. That's inviting someone to run at least a bit through San Juan del Sur, right?
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, you're thinking, yeah, sure, we can do this. I can take Nicaragua, right? The Americans similarly tried to build a canal through Nicaragua, but the rolling series of civil wars in Nicaragua during the 1840s and 1850s made it impossible, which is exactly what Panama was trying to avoid when they signed up with Colombia. The series of wars makes everything impossible, any kind of progress. These unsuccessful efforts, however, did result in the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty of 1850, which promised that regardless of who managed to build a canal first, and at this point everyone was assuming it would be through Nicaragua, neither the US nor the English would have exclusive control over it. Furthermore, neither would build a canal at all without the consent of the others. They also promised not to set up any new colonies or fortify the colonies they already had in the area. Fans of the show, meaning the jib, will recognise the very familiar situation of high-level talks regarding the fate of an area without consulting anyone who lives there.
Absolutely.
You can zoom out on us again now.
If you say so.
Thanks. Yeah.
It's whatever you meant about people trying to seize Nicaragua. We talked about filibustering before. This is one of the nations that William Walker, a famous filibuster, tried to seize.
I deleted all that from my script.
Yeah. It didn't go very well for him. So.
No, but the whole William Walker stuff, Seamus is correct. Yeah. I deleted all that from my script because I felt I wanted. This is already 12 pages long, so I said I'd cut it out. Also, I saw a tweet today that said that it has been revealed to Zelensky that Russia and America are having peace talks about Ukraine.
Surprise, right?
Which is exactly what we're talking about here. America and England are having talks about what's going to happen to Nicaragua.
Yep. The
people in Nicaragua who live there right now are very aware of all this. Right? They didn't just lick it off the stones to their Bolshevik nature, you know? Anyway, that was the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty, right? In 1846, the Bidlack Treaty between Colombia, which is still incorporated Panama by 1846, and the US granted the US a right of way across Panama in exchange for a US guarantee of neutrality for the isthmus and sovereignty for Colombia thereafter, meaning the US would be bound to defend it against threats to that sovereignty, right? That's the Bidlack Treaty. Remember it, it will be relevant later. In 1855, a private American Panama Railroad Company, the American Panama Railroad Company, the APRC, managed to build a railway across Panama. Yay! It had originally been funded in 1849 for $1 million. That's back when $1 million was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But was frequently delayed over the years, fairly predictably, by dense alligator-filled jungles, 200 feet deep swamps. They had to put like gravel, 200-foot worth of gravel all along the swamp so that they could build on it. Yep. Intense humid heat, constant heavy rain because it's the rainforest, mosquitoes, sandflies, cholera, our old friend yellow fever, and malaria. Nevertheless, it was completed right at the tail end of the California gold rush, so Panama suddenly found itself full of idiotic Americans. Not for the last time, right?
Yeah.
People coming to and from California without having to go around Argentina. In 1856, one of these Americans refused to pay a street vendor in Panama City for a watermelon he took, kicking off the watermelon riot. A gang of Panamanians, underneath the Panamanian moon, angry at the sudden loss of oil.
John Oliver was his name, not that John Oliver.
Is that his real name?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
John Oliver refused to pay for a watermelon he took, kicking off the watermelon riot. A gang of Panamanians, angry at the sudden loss of all industries except the railroad, attacked the American and his friend and any other Americans they could find. The railway station was destroyed and some tracks were ripped up. So you can get the symbolism there. You don't need that explained to you. 15 Americans and 2 Panamanians were killed in this riot. The State Department, the US State Department, recommended immediate occupation, and a detachment of soldiers took over what was left of the railway station. The city had calmed down by the time they got there, and the soldiers went home soon afterwards. It was nevertheless the first US military intervention in Panama. American anger at the loss of their citizens was coded in with the Cass-Heron Treaty, signed in 1858, in which Colombia admitted its liability and agreed to pay the Americans $500,000 in compensation. Of course, this is back when $500,000 was a lot of money.
Sure.
In the last decades of the 1800s, the French developers of the Suez Canal, which was completed in 1869, turned their attention to Panama. Now, the Suez Canal, as an engineering thing, is pretty straightforward. Because the desert is flat and it's dry and you just build the thing and you go home, right? As you may predict, the plans so delightfully drawn up in sensible Paris offices hit the brick wall of the rainforest early on, and a workforce of 40,000 was reduced to 18,000 by 1899. This thing is killing people. Yeah. In addition to all the problems faced by the Americans above, they had to deal with the extra problems of venomous snakes, insects, and spiders, and having to constantly recut a path through the mountains due to frequent mudslides in the constant torrential rain. Just as predictably, it ran out of money after sinking $287 million, which runs something like $10 billion in today's money. Or I guess that'll be, 5 cents in Musk dollars. Yeah. That's a lunch. That's a packed lunch for Elon Musk, right? 10 billion. Of course, this is back when, etc., etc. Anyway, the ensuing scandal in France was called the Panama Affair, which turned into one of the biggest corruption scandals of the century, or maybe anywhere ever. One of the many sentenced for corruption and misuse of funds was Gustave Eiffel, who just a few years before had helped design the Statue of Liberty and the Eiffel Tower.
Wow.
In 1901, England and the US signed the Hay-Ponsfo Treaty, which replaced the Clayton-Bulwer Treaty of 1850. This time they agreed the Americans could build a canal across Panama and control it as long as it remained open to ships of all nations. You'll notice again that the Panamanians were not invited to this meeting.
Yeah.
In 1902, the Spooner Act was passed, specifically authorizing the Americans to buy out all French interests in the Panama Canal. Again, without consulting any of them. The French were asking for 100 million, but the Americans were able to bargain them down to 40 million by threatening them with a canal in Nicaragua instead. And then it seemed, the Nicaraguans, by the way, are very aware that their sole purpose in the early 1900s was to act as leverage to bounce down the Panama bid.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. In January 1903, the Hay-Heron Treaty was signed, which gave the Americans the right to the Panama Canal, which was still in Colombia at this stage, remember, for $10 million and a yearly fee for 100 years. It was not ratified by the Colombian government, and instead of renegotiating the contract, they decided on a different strategy that we could call the American solution. The Americans decided to fund and resource the weak Panamanian independence movement. Panama was a province of Colombia at the stage, but there was a weak movement towards independence. And the Panamanians were talked into holding a revolution. They were talked into holding a revolution, right? On the 3rd of November, 1903. A contingent of Colombian soldiers dispatched to put down the revolution were met with a US Navy gunboat already there. The Colombians got the message, and on the 13th of November, 10 days later, the US formally recognized the independent state of Panama. On the 18th of November, 5 days afterwards, the US signed the Hay-Bonao-Varilla Treaty with Panama, granting the US the right to build and administer the Panama Canal Zone and its defenses in perpetuity.
That's convenient.
It is very convenient, and it's a lot cheaper than having to negotiate with the Colombian government.
Right.
They basically invented a country and then decided to deal with them as if they weren't a puppet. Now, the sharper among you, if you've been paying attention, may realize that this is a direct and fairly cynical violation of the Bidlack Treaty, which guaranteed Colombian sovereignty. Does anything deny a country's sovereignty any more than funding an independence movement inside that country? Theodore Roosevelt was very much of the opinion that it's better to seek forgiveness than permission, even with his own people. And he afterwards said, this is his words, "I took the isthmus, I started the canal, and left Congress not to debate the canal, but to debate me." The Colombians were not happy. What?
He's such a turd.
He is, but I mean, I guess he's one of these Mark Zuckerberg break stuff people, but with international politics instead of social media. Sure. The Colombians were not happy. But perhaps surprisingly, lots of Americans weren't happy either, some of them recognizing it as an act of war against Colombia, given it was a violation of the treaty they signed. The New York Times called it an act of sordid conquest, and the New York Evening Post called it a vulgar and mercenary adventure. So, correct on both counts, I think.
Shocking, the Times is on the right side of that for a change.
Well, you've seen me quote from the New York Times quite a lot, and they've been on the right side. Yeah. They just also have been on the wrong side more than we would like, right? Colombia was eventually paid $25 million in 1921 to recognize an independent, i.e. American, Panama. On November 7, 1903, in his address to Congress, Roosevelt claimed that Colombia was, this is more, you're going to hear a lot of this, Colombia was utterly incapable of keeping order on the isthmus, and that it was only the active interference of the United States that protected its sovereignty. And if you're wondering why they're confessing to their crimes like this, they're not confessing, they're bragging. Mm-hmm. And to that wonderful line, I owe The Big Short. Construction began on the Panama Canal. Now with all these pesky natives out of the way. Construction began on the Panama Canal in 1904. This time, as you're no doubt aware, it was done correctly. An advanced team of medical experts was sent in first rather than engineers, including Walter Reed, whose name will probably be familiar to you all. Yep. Walter Reed discovered that yellow fever was spread by mosquitoes and was not otherwise contagious. Up until this point, it was assumed that people were giving it to each other like a cold. It was actually just mosquitoes. I think you can give somebody else yellow fever, but pretty much it's the mosquitoes. They set up municipal sanitation systems, fumigated buildings, sprayed areas where mosquitoes were known to breed, put mosquitoes nets up all over Panama City, and destroyed any stagnant water they could find. And after 2 years of hard work, yellow fever was more or less eliminated. That is a hell of a project. It's wonderful. It's great. And all it took was a bit of, political will and so on. So now people will just be killed by the other 20 things I mentioned and not yellow fever anymore. In 1905, the original French plan to run a canal straight through the mountains was scrapped in favor of a far more sensible lock-based system. You know what I mean by locks. The canal was completed in 1914, and we have a 40-second time-lapse video of how it works here. This is a YouTube I found. It's a very quick video of the time-lapse of the Panama Canal in full operation. I could whistle a little song.
Yeah, really. It's no sound.
It's only 40 seconds, don't worry. But
it's still pretty impressive.
Oh, it's wonderful. Look at that beautiful thing. Look how clever they are and wonderful. And it meant they didn't have to cut through a mountain like they're going through the lake. And
oh, sure. That part there is more impressive, the receding of the water.
Yeah.
As opposed to,
And soon we'll be able to see the Pacific, I guess.
So I think Trump's plan is to actually
There we
just
go.
nuke the whole area, so there's just a big crater and
Well,
holes.
that will
So don't
flatten it
worry about
out.
any of that. Yeah, just
That'll
don't worry
flatten it
about
out.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's the plan going forward. So
And you got to admit, it's a fairly impressive feat of engineering.
it is very
Still,
very
maybe I don't know if it's more or less impressive than the medical feat from the two
sure,
years before. That was bloody genius and brilliant.
especially for
And
this time. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
To break it
brilliant.
down like that. Yeah.
That's the Panama Canal. That was our episode. Good luck, everyone.
Yeah. Really.
Um, In 1955, the Ramon Eisenhower Treaty was signed, which did some admin cleanup on the U.S. ownership of the Panama Canal Zone, which is what it's
Uh huh.
called. The part that the Americans are pretty much, it's like another state. It's called the Panama Canal Zone. It's American run, everything's American in there, Starbucks and whatever, right? And outside it's Panama.
Sure.
And they handed control of 130 U.S. military bases built in Panama during World War II back to Panama. So outside the Panama Canal Zone, they had 130 US military bases, which they now handed back in 1955.
Wow.
The Ramon of the treaty title was vehemently opposed to one part of the negotiations, which was that the Americans take control of the Rio Hato military base, which is 100 kilometers away from the canal in the direction of Japan. Ramon was shot dead on January 2, and the negotiations were concluded 2 weeks later, allowing the Americans the use of the Rio Hato military base.
That'll
Every
work.
source I checked on this made it absolutely clear that there is no connection between these two facts. Now,
Sure.
after the US more or less told England, France, and Israel to get out of the Suez Canal in 1956, and I'm still determined that that's going to be an episode. We've already referred to it a few times in different episodes. The Syria episode had a big chunk of that. England, France, and Israel invaded the Suez Canal, and the US pretty much told them to get out, and they did within a week. So after the US told England, France, and Israel to get out of the Suez Canal in 1956, left-wing elements in Panama became extremely agitated, receiving no satisfactory answers to some very simple questions, like how come your justifications for getting those guys out of the Suez Canal also apply to the Panama Canal?
Yep.
Why are there Americans here? And of course, the most important question of all, would you ever fuck off? The Panama Canal Zone became a hot site for protests, which boiled over in 1959 into full-blown riots. Yay, riots! American soldiers put it down easily enough without killing anyone, and the US decided to quell fears of colonialism. Fears of colonialism. Wouldn't want that happening in Panama, would we?
No. No.
By putting up a huge fence around the canal zone and boycotting local Panamanian businesses.
Well, that's yeah.
Well, the money the local businesses were making were literally the only redeeming factor of the occupation.
Sure.
In 1960, Eisenhower signed off on the largely performative gesture of flying a Panama flag in the canal zone. In 1963, yeah, right?
That's
In
funny.
1963, Kennedy agreed to fly Panama's flag alongside the US flag at all non-military sites inside the canal zone where the US flag was flown. However, Kennedy was assassinated before his orders were carried out. After Kennedy's death, the governor of the Panama Canal Zone, a guy called Robert Fleming, effectively cancelled Kennedy's order by refusing any flags to be flown in the canal zone. Seeing this as a
Now we
capitulation,
finally have a motivation for why they killed him. Thank you, Barry.
you joke, but like, seeing this as a capitulation to the lowly natives, the US colonials started putting US flags up everywhere inside the zone, desperately followed by US zone officials pulling them down again. At Balboa High School, inside the zone, a US flag was removed, put up again, and then guards were posted by the students to prevent its removal. Students from a nearby Panamanian school outside the zone marched to Balboa and put the Panama flag up beside the American flag. The scene was full of students, parents, canal zone officials, colonial police, and an angry mob of onlookers. No one was there for a good time. During the ensuing scuffle, a Panama flag was torn.
Oh no.
The symbolism of this proved too much, and thousands of angry Panamanians gathered on the border of the canal zone. The flag riots quickly spread to other Panamanian cities where American businesses were attacked, American buildings burned to the ground, but in a remarkable show of restraint, as far as I can discover, no actual Americans were harmed.
Wow.
The Americans snapped into action and ordered the US Embassy in Panama to destroy their documents. Shred fucking everything. Remember the Iranian invasion, the Operation Ajax, and in 1979, shred everything, shred everything, right?
Yep.
And then they sent in the Marines, because that always keeps things quiet, right?
Oh, yeah.
Send in the Marines. At the end of the riots, around 20 Panamanians and 4 US soldiers had been killed. In one neighborhood, the US Army sprayed the area with CS tear gas.
Oh, jeez.
What does the CS stand for again? CS, it's carbon sulfide or something, is it? Anyway, a 6-month-old girl a 6-month-old girl, meaning a baby, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maritza Avila Albarca later died with respiratory problems.
Oh, jeez.
Okay, they sprayed the area with CS gas, and this little baby died of respiratory problems. And I've been assured that there's no connection between these two facts.
Sure.
In fact, the US still claims that none of the civilian deaths on that day can be blamed on the US military actions. Meanwhile, in Panama, they called January 9, 1964, Martyrs' Day.
Mm.
In 1968, oh, things are getting handy now, right? The Beatles released that big double album here, the White Album.
Oh, yeah.
Nice. Not nice. In 1968, Arnulfo Arias Madrid, who everybody calls Arias, who had previously served as president of Panama from 1940 to 1941 and from 1949 to 1951, was elected president for a third time. He had been removed twice by the army, and this time was removed again by the army after only 10 days. Arias was fairly America-facing, but he was feared to be a communist since the early days of his first presidency. And I have a declassified document from 1964 which demonstrates the CIA approach to him. This Arias guy is not the worst thing that's going to happen today. Don't worry about it. There's more. Socialist Party, too. The fly sheet favorably impressed Arnulfo Arias, leader of the Panamist Party, blah, blah, blah. Arias learned of plans to impede his election. However, he does not intend to stand idly by and be robbed of his presidency. In any event, the Panamanian people, this is a CIA declassified document. God, I love these things. In any event, the Panamanian people will determine the course of Panamanian history, and if they select communism, it will be a national communism. Arias is not a communist. However, Fidel Castro clarified for him many matters concerning Panama. Arias did not approve of the many points of the Cuban Revolution, particularly its subordination to Moscow. Nevertheless, the Cuban Revolution enlightened him on many matters concerning Panama. So I say now, the conversation he had with Castro was somewhat enlightening.
Yeah.
And he had to be, and the army was like, no, he has to go. Right? The CIA accordingly supported General Torrijos, right? General Torrijos. General Torrijos, who was far more America-friendly in this coup, the 1968 coup. As per the previously established pattern, the agency, CIA, provided training and equipment to Panamanian security forces, collaborating on intelligence gathering and counterinsurgency operations. Torrijos shut down the legislature and put himself and a few of his army friends in charge of the country as the provisional junta of government. Junta meaning council, I think, in this case. Junta means together as well. He also shut down most of the newspapers and turned the one remaining newspaper into a propaganda media outlet. In 1969, with support from the United States, he ousted and exiled everybody else in the junta to become a dictator. But then something terrible happened.
No.
Torrijos, while definitely being an anti-democratic dictator, and therefore normally okay with the CIA, started making very non-CIA noises. He supported investment in healthcare and education. He favored land reform. Yeah. He favored land reform and land redistribution, which is the big socialist thing, right?
Can't have that.
And he wanted to pressure US companies operating in Panama to pay higher wages. You know, he turned into one of these guys that keeps the CIA spooks awake all night in basements at Langley. And after the US multinationals refused to deal with him, this Torrijos guy moved to create an OPEC-like organization for all the Operation Condor countries, which they called the Unión de Países Exportadores de Banano, meaning the Union of Banana Exporting Countries, or UPEB. Now, there's a whole Bananagate... What?
Can't have that.
Can't have that is the correct...
No.
Yeah. There's a whole Bananagate story here involving a United Fruit executive jumping out a 40-story window, literally millions of bribes to various officials in Honduras and Italy, and a trained tarantula called Fernando, but none of that directly relates to Panama, so we'll cover that in a future episode. But we've already covered a bit of it in the Guatemala episode, right? Yeah. For the moment, it's enough to know that every time a country in this union that they tried, this wasn't his idea, but he signed up to it, this union, this banana union, tried to raise taxes on banana exports, initially as tiny as 25 cents per 40-pound box of bananas in Costa Rica. The US company used their not inconsiderable leverage to shut it down. The UPEB still exists, and they describe their aims as to secure remunerative prices for bananas, promote common policies with a view to rationalizing output, exports, transportation, and marketing and pricing, explore new markets, harmonize export availabilities and export demand, develop technical assistance programs with respect to cultivation, processing, and marketing and transportation of bananas, ensure a greater participation of member countries in the world banana economy, promote appropriate diversification programs. Now you'll notice this is their mission statement, completely avoiding anything about raising taxes or paying fair wages, presumably because they don't want to get shot.
Yeah.
In 1973, Torrijos advanced this for adoption at the UN as part of a measure to give Panama more control over the Canal, and this was supported, I'm going to read out a line, but this is just one line in it, but the whole thing was supported by every other UN country on the UN Security Council. We have never been, are not, and will never be an associated state, colony, or protectorate, and we do not intend to add a star to the United States flag. Fair enough, right?
Nice. Nice.
The US vetoed it.
Of course.
Of course they did, yeah, because of course they did. Nevertheless, due to his opposition to communism, and apparently he did have a hatred on him for Moscow, the CIA were able to maintain a working relationship with Torrijos. In 1977, the Torrijos-Carter treaties were signed by Panama and the US. These cancelled all previous treaties and committed the US to return the Canal and all US Army bases in Panama over to Panama by 1999. They also granted the US the right to intervene militarily in perpetuity. Torrijos appeared to be very drunk at the signing ceremony, can anyone blame him, slurring his speech and at one point almost falling over. I do not have footage of this. If I had, you guys would be the first to see it.
So very Boris Yeltsin-ish.
Very Boris Yeltsin, but I'd say I'm saying he was feeling pretty bad about it.
Yeah.
In 1981, Torrijos died in an airplane crash. The Soviet news agency TASS, no friend of Torrijos as we now know, the Soviet news agency TASS accused the Americans of arranging it, and Manuel Noriega, we'll be talking about him in a bit, don't worry. Manuel Noriega himself claimed to have documents proving that certain American agencies were involved. No. I should probably make it clear that the Americans continue to claim there is no connection between the last two factual sentences. Torrijos' cousin is convinced that the CIA killed him using Noriega as an asset because of Torrijos' ongoing support for the Sandinistas in Nicaragua. Nevertheless, however it happened, by 1983, Manuel Noriega, who had been Torrijos' head of intelligence and enforcer, was the dictator of Panama. And now, ladies and gentlemen, what we have is the top 10. Our top 10 today, with our little Tony Montana image, these are the top 10 cocaine busts in history. In 1922, customs officials seized 7 tons of cocaine at the port of Antwerp, a major hub for European drug trafficking. In 2023, authorities seized 7.2 tons of cocaine hidden in shipments bound for Belgium. This was Peru's largest ever drug seizure. In 2021, Dutch authorities confiscated 8 tons, my God, a ton of cocaine, just think about it. 8 tons of cocaine at the port of Rotterdam, setting a new national record. In 2011, Ecuadorian authorities discovered 9 tons of cocaine in banana shipments, preventing a major shipment to Europe. Oh, briefly sending prices high, I guess. Oh. In 2023, Spanish police seized 9.5 tons of cocaine hidden in banana crates in Valencia, the largest bust ever recorded in Spain. In 2021, Colombian authorities intercepted 10 tons of cocaine linked to the Gulf Clan cartel. In 2017, Colombian police seized 12 tons of cocaine, also from the Gulf Clan cartel. In 2019, US authorities seized 20 tons of cocaine aboard the MS Gavan in the port of Philadelphia. You'd know about that. In the port of Philadelphia, 20 tons of cocaine. So you wouldn't be right after that. You'd need medical help. That's enough to knock a horse. 20 tons of cocaine.
Yeah.
It's enough to knock every horse that's ever been existed.
It's almost enough to take care of Philadelphia.
Yeah. In 2021, a coordinated operation led to the seizure of 16 tons in Hamburg, Germany, and 7 tons in Belgium, marking the largest cocaine bust in Europe. And in 2007, Mexican authorities intercepted 23 tons of cocaine in Manzanillo, making it the largest single cocaine seizure in history. 23 tons of coke.
Wow.
Despite all this, by the way, cocaine prices have been pretty much dropping steadily since 1990.
Of course.
And now we're going to talk about the pock-marked elephant in the room, Manuel Noriega, a man who was called Pineapple Face for obvious reasons. Manuel Noriega, who'd been involved in the 1968 coup, was well known to the Americans since the 1960s when he was suspected of being involved with drug smuggling operations. Where would they get that idea from? Yeah. They were also aware that he was working with Cuban intelligence, which he definitely was. Therefore, in 1971, the CIA hired him. That's what you do, isn't it? With drug smuggling guys who are working with communist intelligence agencies, you hire them. Among other things, he helped direct US funds to the Contra rebels in Honduras and also was happy to let the CIA set up various surveillance outposts throughout Panama. Now, this Honduras thing, Nicaragua-Honduras thing, we covered in an episode we did called Iran-Contra, if you want to check it out. In 1976, a hot year for Panama. In 1976, the US was knee-deep in the final stages of the Torrijos-Carter treaties I mentioned before and had ordered wiretap surveillance on several Panamanian officials. Noriega was not informed, but as head of Panamanian intelligence, he found out. And instead of busting the operation, he bribed the agents and took the tapes and used them as leverage against officials during the negotiations. His drug smuggling operations came up again when the treaties were being ratified, but the CIA strongly advised against any action. because they were in the middle of this Sandinistas thing, right?
Right.
In 1983, Noriega had finished his political maneuvering, consolidated the various Panama armed forces into one united PDF, meaning the Panama Defense Forces, and not the document I just showed you, which is also a PDF, and was the undisputed leader of Panama. At the time, he said, and this is a direct quote from him, "I am not a dictator." One of his first acts was to send a law through the Puppet National Assembly to triple the size of the military and tool them up with American weapons. So now Panama became flooded with American weapons. In 1984, Noriega held a presidential election. Now, this prompted Arias, our old friend from 1968, to return and stand as a candidate. As Arias looked like he was going to smash it, Noriega stopped the count in the middle and declared a victory for his candidate. He just stopped it. And by this time, Reagan's government was in the weeds again, fighting the Sandinistas, and they felt they needed Noriega on side more than they needed democracy in Panama. And for more on the madness that the CIA was up to in Nicaragua, check out episode 33 of the Jib, Iran-Contra. In 1976, Noriega was getting $100,000 a year from the CIA. By the Reagan years, he was getting $200,000 of CIA cash per year.
Jesus.
Once he saw that the Americans were doing nothing about his very blatant theft of an election, he realized he could probably get away with anything at all and ramped up cocaine production and processing. The CIA were either knowingly involved or extremely incompetent, and I don't know, Seamus, what do you think?
I'm going to say probably both. A little bit
Okay,
of both.
but if you had to pick one.
Definitely aware.
So more than incompetent, knowingly involved.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, there were one of those, because Noriega was using the entire infrastructure of Contra support against the Sandinistas in Nicaragua to smuggle literal tons of cocaine into the United States. For instance, CIA airplanes full of weapons for the rebels would land in Panama, hand out the weapons, and head back to Miami full of cocaine. Noriega needed to project the image of someone who was fighting actively the drug industry, though, so on at least one occasion he staged a raid against a cocaine processing facility that he must surely have set up. Now, this cocaine thing, of course, I make lots of coke jokes because it's funny. It's not all rich white people having fun, right? Cocaine destroyed entire working class community in North America during this time.
Yep.
And let's just say it, black.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep.
Entire black communities were destroyed by various cocaine products in the 1980s, and this Noriega guy was numero uno in that. Right? And I will still be making cocaine jokes about people, David Bowie and so on. That's still going to happen. Nothing we can do about it. But keep that in the back of your head. There's not all fun and games, and entire communities were destroyed by this shit. Fucking poison. Sorry. Noriega was asked to speak at Harvard's John F. Kennedy School of Government in 1985 on how the militaries of Latin America could be used in the fight against drugs. And this is a part of that speech. According to the formal interpretation, the region's problems are located between freedom and oppression, between dictatorship and democracy. But a closer look at the roots of the conflict shows that such a view does not correspond to reality, that the analysis of the problem cannot proceed in this way. To prove that the formal interpretation is correct, you need only ask each Central American people if they've ever been given an opportunity to fully participate in the political and economic lives of their countries. You cannot escape the conclusion that the answer would be negative. The Central American people have been absent from consideration of their own destinies. True enough. To solve the Central American problem, however, one cannot fall into the belief that democracy is merely depositing a political vote. Democracy is not reducible to an electoral exercise. Real and effective democracy should be teaching aware democracy in which a man does not merely act within the political concepts cultivated by the parties. That is a democracy in which a man has an idea of an economy and social rights. I include Panama within this view and within these concepts. Now, this is the year after he literally stopped an election and declared, right?
Yeah, a little convenient.
Classic Noriega, right?
Yeah.
Also in 1985, an activist called Hugo Spadafora, and I know you know about this guy. Hugo Spadafora announced his intentions to expose the scope of Noriega's drug trafficking, which in 1985 would have been fucking massive, right? This guy, Spadafora's body was later found in a USPS bag in Panama, by the way, so they had to find a US Postal Service bag to put him into. He had been tortured for hours in the most horrific ways and decapitated. Gary Webb said in his Dark Alliance series, Gary Webb we mentioned before, in his Dark Alliance series, his body bore evidence of unimaginable tortures. His thigh muscles had been sliced so he could not close his legs. Something was jammed up his rectum, tearing it apart, not as fun as it sounds. His testicles were swollen, and there's a gap. His ribs were broken, and then, while he was still alive, his head had been sawed off.
Oh, Christ.
Well, I mean, you got to send a message.
Just fucking shoot him and be done with it. You know what I mean?
That's not a message, man.
The
message is don't fuck with my cocaine
post
trafficking.
office bag was a message. That was enough. God damn.
I mean, I would agree with you, but I guess the Panamanians do things they do things Noriega style. Spadafora's head has still never been found. We have to assume it's somewhere, right? As for Noriega's personal involvement, the following telephone transcript was intercepted between the police chief, where Spadafora was initially arrested on the border with Costa Rica, and Noriega. Cordoba, as the chief seat is, "We have the rabid dog, Noriega, and what do you do with rabid dogs?" Okay, so you decide for yourself.
They took their time putting the fucking dog down. Jesus Christ.
Yeah, you wouldn't torture a rabid dog, would you?
No.
But I think that's fair to say that's giving him the go-ahead to...
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In 1987, Noriega had promised to hand over control of Panama to his deputy, a guy called Diaz Herrera. That's his name. Diaz Herrera is a single surname, two surnames, Diaz Herrera. However, he instead did a Putin and installed himself as leader for the next 5 years. Herrera was not happy about this at all and responded by accusing Noriega of a massive drug trafficking, rigging elections, and the murders of Hugo Spadafora and Torrijos by planting a bomb on Torrijos' airplane. By the way, all things we kind of accept as true by now. After Noriega placed him under house arrest, Panamanians held protests and rallies in support of Diaz Herrera. One march in Panama City had 100,000 people, which was a significant chunk of the entire population of the city. Diaz Herrera was imprisoned shortly afterwards and eventually given political asylum in Venezuela. He wrote a bunch of books about the political situation in Panama, including Panama, Mucho Más que Noriega, and El Canal, Sangre, Codicia y Coraje. Right? The first book he wrote is called Panama, Mucho Más que Noriega, which is a beautiful title. If you want to write a book about Panama, a good title is Much More Than Noriega. The same as if you're writing a book about Colombia, Much More Than Cocaine or whatever, right? Great. And the second title is El Canal, Sangre, Codicia and Coraje. My Spanish, as I said, is not fantastic. I don't know what Codicia means, but Coraje means courage and Sangre means blood. So the name is The Canal, Blood, Something, and Courage, which, again, unless it's like something stupid, is a lovely name for a book. Sweat, maybe. Codicia? I don't know what Codicia means. I'm sure someone in the chat will tell us. Surely to be Jesus, one of our people in the chat will speak Spanish. El Canal, Sangre, Codicia, and Coraje. Go, fly. Tell us what it means. Diaz Herrera is still alive, and as far as I know, he lives in Peru. The CIA always knew. But in 1986, articles by Seymour Hersh, our old friend, and Bob Woodward, another one of our friends, about Noriega's Cuban intelligence connections were published. The CIA could not quash these two giants of journalism, and so Noriega's bullshit became common knowledge. Now remember, this is just about his Cuban intelligence connections. They're not really pissed off about the drugs yet. In 1988, and this is when they start figuring out, Noriega was charged by a federal grand jury of drug trafficking on a massive scale, or as the indictment said, turning Panama into a shipping platform for South American cocaine that was destined for the US. Correct, right? Of course, there's not a lot you can do after issuing an arrest warrant for someone who lives in a different country. It's not like you can just go over there and drag him out, right? Right, Seamus? Right? You can't just go there and drag him out.
That would be wrong.
That would be a violation of international law, I think we'd call that, right?
Yep.
In 1989, Noriega held another general election, this time between his chosen candidate, Carlos Duque, and the pro-democratic Guillermo Endara. Guillermo is the Spanish word for William. Guillermo Endara.
I use Google.
Google.
The channel, Blood, Greed, and Courage.
Greed. That's wonderful.
Makes more sense, right?
Blood, Greed, and Courage is a beautiful name for that book. The Canal, Blood, Greed, and Courage. That should be the subtitle to our podcast. Will we just put that up underneath the description? No, seriously. The Canal, Blood, Greed, and Courage, yeah. Blood, Greed, and Courage. Yeah, we're going to see some of the blood in a bit. Yay. Where are we? Guillermo Endara, who apparently, this Endara guy, the guy who was going up against Noriega's candidate, Duque, Endara apparently honestly believed he was in a normal election and might have a chance, right? If he wasn't paying attention, I don't know what's going on, but this Endara guy seems kind of all right. Early exit polls gave Endara a decisive lead, which Noriega was apparently not expecting. Like many dictators, he assumed the love of his people.
Right.
He was going to name Noriega, that is, was going to name Duque as the winner no matter what, using fairly rudimentary election rigging tactics. He didn't make much bother of hiding what he was doing. But the public knowledge of the Endara landslide made things difficult. Foreign observers, the Catholic Church, and anyone with eyes and ears accused Noriega of widespread election irregularities. Noriega's trick to get out of this was to agree, say as the election was clearly rigged, the result had to be cancelled. And that's got a certain cynical charm to it, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna have to cancel these results, mate. This election is rigged to fuck. Oh, yeah, you're not wrong. Anyway, the next day after the election was cancelled, pro-Noriega street gangs beat the shit out of Guillermo Endara and his running mate, Guillermo Ford. We have a photo of Guillermo Ford here.
Okay.
Actions which were, unfortunately for Noriega, extensively photographed and published worldwide. That man is the vice president the day after he got voted, if Noriega hadn't stopped the election. That's the blood for you there. That's the sangre, right? I mean, it's just ridiculous. You know? I mean, how are you supposed to take anything in that country seriously? The following week, Jimmy Carter, our old friend Jim, put us back. That's a horrible image.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I don't think it's unpleasant to look at now. The following week, Jimmy Carter, who was in Panama on his first post-presidency international diplomatic adventure as an election observer, was placed under house arrest. And by the way, we in this podcast have more than once said, I wish post-presidency Jimmy Carter would have a word with presidency Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
Right? Because he did great work in Panama. We can't lie about it. He was on his first post-presidency international diplomatic adventure as an election observer. He was placed under house arrest. When he was eventually released, he was refused access to any media services or any audience with any Panama government personnel. He walked across the road to a hotel and spoke to a random group of reporters there, and he said, "The government is taking this election by fraud. It's robbing the people of Panama of their legitimate rights." And we cannot understate this. Jimmy Carter was being extraordinarily brave there.
Yeah.
He risked being shot dead, or worse, as we saw from Spadafora. He was a brave man on that particular day, and we're not going to shit on him. We'll shit on him some other time, right? Which we have in Operation Cyclone. Check it out. Plenty of shitting on Carter if you missed that. But here he did great, and Bula Boss, as we said earlier. In December 1989, Panama's puppet government appointed Noriega as, and this is true, maximum leader. They also his puppet government also declared war on the United States.
That's the right thing.
Yeah.
That's going to end well.
Well, don't declare war on the United States if you're not at war with them. Yeah. Like, maybe if you are at war, do it, right?
Ask Hitler how that worked out.
Hey! Or, yeah. The following day, a U.S. Marine was shot dead at a Panama checkpoint. Apparently, for not much more than the fact that he was a U.S. Marine.
That's not good.
There were at the time around 35,000 American citizens in Panama. The U.S. government finally decided they were sick of Noriega's shit and launched I was supposed to change that out. That's another one of my placeholder phrases. They were sick of his shit. I meant to rephrase. The U.S. government finally decided.
You have to realize, Barry, that's one thing that kind of frowned on. You know, you could shoot civilians, women and children, but God damn it, don't shoot one of our Marines.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a line too fucking far.
Yes.
You know,
that's where we draw the line.
Yeah.
The U.S. government finally decided they had become tired of Noriega's tomfoolery and launched Operation Just Cause, which is the name of it, and this will be the name of this episode too, if all going well. A full-scale invasion of Panama. One of the reasons it had taken so long, and I don't know, I mean, was Reagan's vice president, George H.W. Bush, was running for president in 1988, and there were very real concerns that it would emerge Bush had authorized payments of hundreds of thousands of dollars, which were effectively being used to fund the largest cocaine smuggling operation in U.S. history.
AKA Iran-Contra.
Iran-Contra, yeah. As soon as Bush was inaugurated in January of 1989, the government could start making proper plans. Now, you know how I love numbers and our names for things and army divisions and so on. This is just, strap in, guys. This is just going to be like the third book of the Iliad is just all a description of the ships, you know. This is going to be like this. This is the third book of the Iliad, but for Panama. The invasion involved the 82nd Airborne Division, the 7th Infantry Division, the 7th Special Forces Group, the 75th Ranger Regiment, the 507th and 602nd Tactical Air Wings, the 24th Composite Wing, the 1721st Combat Control Squadron, the 5th Infantry Division, the 61st Infantry Regiment, the 6th Infantry Regiment, which were 10 separate military police brigades, battalions and companies, the 193rd Infantry Brigade, the 87th, 508th and 9th Infantry Regiments, the 6th Marines Regiment, the 2nd Light Armoured Reconnaissance Battalion, the 2nd Marine Logistics Group, the 39th Combat Engineer Battalion Company, and the Missouri National Guard and a trained tarantula called Fernando. This was the first time since the Vietnam War that a National Guard unit was called into active duty.
It's crazy.
You think that's the end of the numbers and the names and so on, but they were flown into Panama. You ready? Strap in. I'm just going to start. Hang on. Ready?
Huh?
They were flown into Panama in an airborne armada, which included C-130 Hercules tactical transport, the 37th and 314th Tactical Airlift Wing, AC-130 Spectre gunships, OA-37B Dragonfly aircraft, the C-141 Starlifter, C-5 Galaxy strategic transports, the F-117A Nighthawk stealth aircraft, the 37th Tactical Fighter Wing, and AH-64 Apache attack helicopters.
Wow.
That's it.
Seems like a little bit of overkill.
It was the first deployment that I'm aware of, anyway, of the 117A Nighthawk, the F-117 aircraft. I don't know. I think it was the first one of those. A sub-operation with... do you have the script in front of you? You don't need it. I'm just asking.
I have it now.
Okay. A sub-operation within Operation Just Cause was Operation Acid Gambit. And you know how I love these operation names. Breaking Kurt Moose out of a Panama prison. Kurt Moose had been key to one of the many coup attempts. There was repeated coup attempts in the 80s against Noriega in the previous decade. The Panamanians had threatened to kill him, meaning Moose, if the US invaded, so it was an urgent matter. And they did. They broke him out. Kurt Moose is still alive. He describes himself as the first civilian hostage rescue in modern military history, and you can book him to do a talk if you like.
Okay.
Apparently he's a funny guy. He peppers his harrowing ordeal with a few little jokes. The US forces... Sorry, what?
I said fun.
Yeah. In the main operation, the US forces dominated early, destroying most of their targets. In the early hours of the morning of 20th December, the impossible optimism of Guillermo Anada was rewarded as he was sworn in as duly elected president of Panama. So good for him, right? Meanwhile, Noriega was panicking. The sub-operation within Operation Just Cause, specifically to arrest Noriega, was called Operation Nifty Package. You like that, don't you? Nifty Package. Yeah. U.S. forces had destroyed
That's what she said.
That's what, hey! U.S. forces had destroyed his boat and his airplane, leaving him with increasingly poor options for escape. A few days later, he somehow made it into the Vatican embassy in Panama City, by some accounts disguised as a woman. It was a stroke of genius, as the Vatican embassy was probably one of the few embassies which A, would never hand him over on principle, and B, even the Americans couldn't storm. I mean, they could, but they would never do that. There's a bunch of embassies the Americans wouldn't give a shit about storming, and the Vatican is not one of them, right?
Yeah.
The good news is that the Americans could play some music, which they did. They played loud rock music, which Noriega had previously said he hated, including and also a lot of rap music, including Fight the Power by Public Enemy. Fight the Power, right?
I remember the joke was that if we did take him in custody, during this time, James Brown was in prison. They were going to put him in a cell next to him. And James Brown
ain't no drag. Okay. Bush's national security advisor called this a low moment in U.S. Army history because he felt it was very silly. Over 10 days of this constant blaring rock music outside the Vatican embassy, the Monsignor in the embassy became increasingly desperate and asking Noriega to leave, and he kept refusing to leave. Eventually, he told Noriega he would take the entire diplomatic staff out, move to a different building in Panama, and declare that the Vatican embassy, leaving him alone in what would just be some random building then surrounded by the largest mobilization of US troops since Vietnam. Noriega surrendered. In 1992, Noriega was sentenced in Florida to 40 years in prison.
Can we hold on 1 second, though?
Yep. I have a photo of his arrest. There, keep talking while you put his arrest up.
Well, what about the tanks?
Forget about the tanks.
Okay.
Put up Noriega. I have a photo of tanks you're not going to see, folks.
I'll show them both. That motherfucker who brought up, there's tanks going through. Yeah.
Look at that.
Motherfucker brought up the whole, this is the low moment, all this shit. How about the 300 civilians that were killed during this?
Oh, this is the same America that, see literally any previous episode of The Jib. Yeah, that's the low moment. There's Noriega being hoofed into the back of a military airplane, having been arrested and going on trial. There's no evidence that they took care of him pretty well. They didn't do anything stupid to him. They took care of him.
Yeah.
As you showed with prisoners, even of Noriega's stature, you should take care of your prisoners, right?
Right.
Yeah. During his... Was that... Do you have something else you wanted to say?
No, just
the low moment of the U.S. Army was playing music in Panama, not Vietnam, not anything else they were up to. Yeah,
or even in just that simple conflict. I mean, they killed 200 to 300 people. They said that were combatants, but nobody's even sure if they were combatants. And they did 300 civilians. They eliminated like blocks of just
Yep.
just surveillance for no fucking reason.
Yeah.
You know, and a lot of this is also because George Bush was always called a wimp, and he was looking for a fucking reason to flex his muscles.
Yeah. He felt it was emasculating, didn't he?
Yes. So fuck that guy.
Well,
fuck
you can see down in the image beneath us there. You can see George Bush's penis there. It still looks a bit limp to me, but anyway.
Yeah.
During his trial, Noriega said, "Everything done by the Republic of Panama under my command was known. Panama was an open book." He means the CIA, and of course he is correct. Also, I was a friend of the United States until they decided I wasn't, which is a story, again, which will be familiar to many people who've been watching our podcast. That goes with many, many people we're talking about. The simple, they betrayed me, which, of course, from his point of view, was 100% accurate.
Yeah.
He served 17 years before being extradited in 2010 to France, where I think he was facing money laundering charges. In 2011, he was sent back to serve time in Panama, but by then, no one in Panama or anywhere else took him seriously. He was just broken.
That's kind of funny, actually.
Yeah. It's true, isn't it?
Yeah.
In 1999, 10 years after the invasion, Maria Moscoso, the widow of Arias, our old friend Arias of 1968 coup fame, defeated Martin Torrijos, the son of the late dictator, to become president of Panama in what we all regard as a free and fair election. Also in 1999, as per the Torrijos-Carter treaties, the canal was returned to Panama.
Yay.
Yay. Looks like things are finally coming together for Panama, right?
Yep.
More recently, Panama has tried to avoid being so reliant on the United States, because how did that go? And formed more international relationships, especially with China. Chinese state-controlled companies operate ports on either side of the canal. The Chinese are building a bridge across it, and they're tunneling a metro underneath it. Right? So the Chinese are pumping construction money into this thing, and that's what Panama wants. They want to diversify their international relationships, is what we call that. In December of last year, 2023, Trump said that the US would retake control of the canal and that it was falling under Chinese control, which is not true at all. Right. Panama responded by claiming the canal for Panama as their inalienable patrimony, correct? Protesters marched on the US embassy in Panama, declaring Trump a public enemy. Since then, Trump has repeatedly threatened to take control of the Panama Canal from Panama. And that brings us up to last night and the reason I wanted to do this podcast. That's it. That's what we know about Panama. I'm over an hour. I'm a tick over an hour.
Pretty good. I mean, this could have been a 12-parter because there's so much.
It could. I skipped all the stuff. You mentioned some of the stuff I skipped. So we managed to cover stuff we skipped, right? Yeah. We did good. Any last observations before we launch ourselves into our newly disappointing new news?
Fuck George Bush. Fuck all the presidents involved in this. And fuck Donald Trump. So, yeah.
I'll do. I'll take that. And now, what is new? Right. Seamus, of course, has copyright on all of the little tunes we play. This is the part we call What's New. We put CIA and FBI into Google. We hit the news tab and see what current madness these people are up to. In case you think like this is all historical stuff, they're also up to crazy ass shit these days. Seamus, tell us about your FBI picks.
From The Guardian, MLK family fears new batch of assassination files will have FBI smears. So I don't know if you guys know this, but Trump signed an executive order to release some of these files. JFK also.
I agree with that.
I believe. Yeah, I'm fine with that.
We like Trump.
And if we'll do MLK one of these days. There's a lot to cover as far as the FBI and that. So we already know about the letter that they sent him to basically, hey, maybe you should kill yourself. It's also kind of funny.
We've seen that letter. I've seen that letter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also funny because every fucking year on his birthday, the FBI tweets something about him. It's like, motherfucker, you guys tried to kill this guy. So we probably did kill this guy.
They tried to gaslight him into killing himself.
Yeah.
Like for real, the FBI.
Yep. Yeah. So their concerns is there going to be more bullshit released from that, which is, I think, pretty valid.
It's fair.
Let's see. This is in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. Vanny Capelli, the FBI purge could lead to another 9/11. So there's fears that all these people getting kicked out of the FBI because, Trump doing his little purge, that there's going to be giant gaps of intelligence that might, somebody like a Bin Laden would take advantage of, and there'll be another.
Wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would not be surprised. I would
Now
not be
is the
surprised
time.
if
They're
we.
sluicing. They're filleting the intelligence agencies now and the federal agencies. Now is the time to do something.
Yep, I would absolutely. Like my son literally texted me the one night. He goes, "So how soon before we get another 9/11? Do you think? The way things are going."
Yeah.
And I said, 6 months, and then like literally the next night, I'm like, make it 3. Because it just shit is just getting off the hinge. This one's a little bizarre, but I mean, I guess it does make sense. Tensions over the FBI work on Hamas case spills into the open. So it seems like the FBI wanted to investigate what happened on October 7th in Israel.
Yeah. The Israelis won't allow that.
Yeah, the Justice Department is telling them now.
Yeah, well, who's telling them? I can promise you it's the Israelis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what all this is. And they keep saying, there's a Hamas influence and all this. I don't think it's a Hamas influence.
No.
Yeah. So it's this isn't the New York Times. So obviously they have
Well, the defense minister last week, by the way, if you're keeping up with the Israel thing, he confirmed that the Hannibal Directive was in operation during October 7th.
Yep.
We suspected it because of the various anomalies that didn't make much sense when you look at what happened on October the 7th. We suspected the Hannibal Directive. The Hannibal Directive is an Israeli army directive. It's a protocol which you direct the soldiers to shoot their own citizens and soldiers to prevent them from becoming hostages.
Yep.
So they have done this before. They will kill their own people and then blame the other guys. That's the Hannibal Directive. Right?
A lot of it's based in
October 7th.
A lot of it's based in white supremacy because they see it as being
of course,
in hands of the unclean.
Yeah, they're animals.
They don't want them. Yeah, they don't want the savages. This is their words, not mine.
Yeah.
They don't want them to be, touching them.
The greasy savages.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
Like Netanyahu, whenever his brother Yogi died, he was upset because of who killed him, and then he found out that those people were lighter skinned than he thought. So it was okay then.
Yeah.
Oh, that's just.
Yeah. The Zionists are white supremacists.
Yep.
If you don't think that the Zionist government of Israel is white supremacist, you're going to have to explain how come Jews come in all different colors. The Mediterranean ones are called Sephardic Jews. The black ones are called Beta Israel. The Arab-looking ones are called Mizrahi Jews. The white-looking Jews are called Ashkenazi Jews. You're going to have to explain why every single president of Israel since the dawn of the state has been Ashkenazi Jew. Now, I know the answer, but the people who think the Zionists are not white supremacists do not.
Also, look at the connections between the Nazis and the Zionists.
The Zionists were the first people to break the boycott of the Nazis. Yep. That's just true, man. Anyway, look, we'll do it some other time. I'll do it during my Israel episode when we feel like getting cancelled, right?
Okay, next week?
Not next week, no. Next week will be the part 3 of the Lavender Scare, I thought.
No. Well, the only way we're going to do Lavender Scare is if you finally admit some things, Barry. So, anyways, your turn.
Do you think I know what you're talking about?
You do.
I like girls.
It's not what your mom said.
Oh! My mother's been dead since 2004, so good luck at that seance. Anyway, I have some CIA links that I put into the Google and hit news. The Oscar-nominated documentary Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat recounts the events leading up to Black American jazz musicians Abbie Lincoln and Max Roach's 1961 protest at the United Nations of the CIA-backed killing of Congolese leader Patrice Lumumba. So if you want to know more about that, check out our episode, Patrice Lumumba. Yeah. Another one I found was...
sounds interesting too.
You what?
That documentary sounds interesting too. Then.
Yeah. Yeah, watch our episode before so you have the background. Yeah. The next link is from the Washington Post. It says, under Trump, CIA plots bigger role in drug cartel fight. The CIA is poised to take a larger, more aggressive role under Trump in the battle against Mexican-based drug cartels, devising and evaluating plans to share more intelligence with regional governments, train local counter-narcotics units, and possibly conduct other covert actions. So, if you've been following our episodes, you will know that the phrase training local counter-narcotics units is code language for something else.
Yeah.
But apparently, I don't know how they're going to ramp up their business if they're going to fillet the agency. Which leads me to my third link, which is the Central Intelligence Agency offered buyouts to its entire staff on Tuesday. in what officials say is a bid to bring the agency in line with Trump's priorities, including targeting drug cartels. The CIA is the first intelligence agency to tell its employees that they can quit their jobs, all of them, and receive 8 months of pay and benefits as part of a push to downsize the federal government. So somehow he wants to downsize the organization while ramping up their... Good luck with that. Fuck not. Yeah. Those are my CIA links. And I think that is our episode, Seamus.
Two things on the what's now from what you just said, and also
go.
Should have included. Would not be surprised though if they are able to maintain the CIA that's Mexico is going to be a target, considering the fact they have a socialist running the country right now.
Yeah.
The other thing is
she's a Jewish name, does she? That one.
I can't remember.
Goldstein.
As of the day of the recording this, which is the 17th, Kash Patel has not been confirmed, and there is pushback. So,
do you think he will be?
I don't know, man.
Oh man, it's still looking okay.
They are actually trying to push back instead of just do lip service, and half of them voted.
That's good.
Anyway, so,
and it's coming from Republicans or Democrats?
Mainly Democrats. But I do believe that some Republicans, actually, like whenever they did RFK, a couple of Republicans voted against him.
Yeah,
he still got in, so we're there. So.
We'll
all have polio and measles and everything again back here. So.
What's the second thing?
That was it.
Okay, two things. And is that our episode?
Yep, that's our episode. And
okay,
next week
I guess in 2 weeks we're going to have part 3 of Lavender Scare.
No, it'll be FBI or Founding Fuckheads. We'll have to figure that out. So.
Or Jib Jabs.
Or Jib Jab, yeah.
Jib Jabs. Our first Jib Jab was that guy, that culty guy.
Yeah, Linda LaRouche. So it'll be something. May or may not be a guest.
You will like it. It will be fun and interesting, and you will like it. Join us in 2 weeks, and thank you for joining us today.
See you guys.